So let me move on and look at the first slide. I shall give you a little bit of background. There's a company called BP. You may have heard of them. They have a little local difficulty in the Gulf of Mexico. They also suffered from a rather unfortunate chief executive. This chief executive decided one sunny weekend in the early summer to take his son sailing for the weekend. Now, if I was to say to you, is there anything wrong with a chief executive of a large international organisation going sailing at the weekend with his son? I think most of us, quite reasonably, would say nothing at all. But in this particular instance, there was something wrong with it, because it actually sent out completely the wrong message. It was wrong at three levels. It was wrong in terms of behaviour, because it gave the impression that he was not focused on solving a problem that his company had solved. It was wrong in terms of communications, because he should have had the good sense to stay at home and not send out the wrong message. And unfortunately, his public relations people didn't get it either. This was a quote from one of his spokespeople. "We wouldn't dream of commenting on what the chief executive does in his rare moments of private time." Well, you do dream about getting involved with what your chief executive does in his rare moments of private time, if it has a major effect on your reputation, if it has a major effect on a key stakeholder. Because if one of the people who reacted negatively to his weekend sailing trip was the chief of staff of the most powerful man in the world, the President of the United States of America, and whatever we think about him and the United States of America, for BP, they are a key stakeholder, and his sailing exploits have an effect on a relationship with a key stakeholder. Okay, so let me now just point you in the direction of some of the evidence that I'm using to support my views. This is some definitions of reputation, and let me just point out some aspects of some of them. If we look at the first aspect, then it's very much about how the organisation is regarded by multiple stakeholders. So we have stakeholder relationships. The second line is about the collective view of multiple stakeholders, the same. The third line makes the point that there's no standard approach to the complex relationships we have with stakeholders. So again, stakeholder relationships. And the final two make a point about trust. The first, line 4, the first mentions that businesses operate through cooperation and relationships and trust. And the final point reinforces the point about how trust is important. So, what this slide is telling me is reputation is characterized by communications and stakeholder management. Just as an aside, Tony mentioned the Institute for PR. He described it very accurately as an American think tank. And a lot of the evidence that I've used for my thinking is from that source. The two good characteristics of the Institute for PR is that their material is A, online, sorry, three characteristics. A, online, B, credible, and C, free. This is another important point here, and I'll read it out to you. The ability to have good relationships with multiple stakeholders may be the core value of an organisation. The ability to manage multi-stakeholder relationships is critical to the communications function. So the first point is that stakeholder management is key. The second is that it's a communication responsibility. Other than the CEO, the communications profession may be the only management function that takes a multi-stakeholder perspective, and this may be one of the distinguishing characteristics of the communications profession. So if we take this quote at face value, it's putting us right in the core of what the organisation is trying to do. I'm not one of those public relations people who is unhappy about being associated with marketing. I think that it's valid that public relations sometimes operates in a marketing context, but we also do a little bit more. Our brief is wider than just consumers and potential consumers. So this is establishing us as doing something more than just perhaps what the brands have on terms of managing, in terms of affecting the reputation of organisations. This is quite an interesting one. Reputation is the most useful concept for organisations where publics are mainly strangers, whereas reputations might be less important and therefore relationships more important with organisations that have relatively few and long-standing relationships with key stakeholders. I think there's one thing that this forgets is the fact that we may the multiplier effect that stakeholders have. The example, for example, that I gave you of the handling agent being a very important means of managing my view, my perception, my view of the reputation of the airline that they're partnering with. Finally, to turn to the topic of measurement and evaluation. What you see on the screen now is the Barcelona principles, which were recently established by the public relations profession as the essential principles that should underpin effective evaluation. It would be very difficult to disagree with them, but I think that there's a challenge hidden in the first 3 bullet points. The first 3 bullet points talk about a focus on goal setting, objective setting, and outcomes, and business results. And that this is the hurdle that I find quite difficult to overcome. And that is, public relations is quite often essential, a very important part of the achievement of business results. But it's quite difficult to untangle, to unpick, to separate the effect of public relations, the effect of other communications activity, the effect of the environment. So I'm very attracted in my role as a wimp, in my role as a coward. I'm very attracted to anything that enables goal-free evaluation, and certainly the measurement of relationships falls into that category. So this is work that comes from the Institute for Public Relations, and it's the final point that I want to make, and that is what we should be measuring if we want to measure the effectiveness of our relationships with key stakeholders. Control mutuality is the first one. It's the extent to which people have control over the relationship. The relationship is probably never balanced, but people like to feel that they have some control over it. Secondly, trust. Trust has been thrown up in our look at reputation management. And there are three factors that are important in trust. They're integrity, that the organisation is seen as fair. Dependability, and that an organisation will do what it says it will do. And competence, that it actually has the ability to say what it will do. Commitment, so that both parties think it's worth making some sort of effort. And satisfaction, that both parties, to some extent, at least feel favourable about each other. If you follow that link, you'll see a lot more detail, almost at the level, I think, from memory of a questionnaire that you can use to actually measure those relationships. So, some sort of conclusion. Reputation is a key element of the value of an organisation, even though it's intangible. I think Coca-Cola reckons that reputation is 90% of the value of the brand. Somebody might be able to correct me on that, but that's my recollection. It's also an insurance policy for when the going gets tough, then your reputation can help you through that. An example from the UK is Marks and Spencer's, who you may have heard of. They've had some difficult times over the last 10 to 15 years, and they've managed to survive those difficult times, in part because of the very positive reputation they built up over a long period of time. It is, of course, about how an organisation behaves. If BP had been technically more competent, they may not have started pumping oil into the Gulf of Mexico. But it's also about how it communicates with important stakeholders and how those stakeholders in turn communicate with the rest of us. So, a key element to managing our reputation is managing the relationships we have with key stakeholders, and public relations function is in the best possible position to be responsible for that, and by being responsible for that and measuring its effectiveness, we can make a major contribution to what our clients or the organisations we serve are trying to achieve. Thank you.